Hey everybody, this video is called Look at All These Rulers, and today we're going to continue our pass-through study here in the book of 2 Kings, looking at the 15th chapter as we're making our way through the book of 2 Kings. And today we're going to see many different names of kings of Israel in a very unstable monarchy. So chapter 15, start verse 1 through 4 says, "In the 27th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Azariah, the son of Amaziah, king of Judah, became king. He was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jecholiah of Jerusalem, and he did what was right in the sight of the Lord according to all that his father Amaziah had done, except that the high places were not removed. The people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places." So here we are starting out this chapter looking at another king named Azariah, and we see that he got like a C in his kingship, where he did good things in the sight of the Lord, but there was one thing that he did not do well. And this is taking place here in the 27th year in 767 BC. And that included the 11 years of Jeroboam. And it's co-regency with Jehoash. And Azariah, when you look at the name meaning, it means that the Lord has helped. And he was also called Uzziah, meaning the Lord is my strength. And the prophet Isaiah began his public ministry during this king's reign, as you will find in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 1. And in verse 2, we see another year written, 52 years, which was between 790 to 739 BC. And Azariah was 16 years old when he began his co-regency with his father Amaziah. And like I say all the time as I go through the Old Testament, you're going to see names that are very interesting and can make you have a tongue twister, like Amaziah and Azariah. You know, they didn't want to take it easy on us with these names. But Azariah's sole rule began in 767 BC. And as I mentioned, he did right in the eyes of the Lord, and he came to the throne in a very difficult era. And a preacher, Russell Doday, he wrote in his commentary on the book of 2 Kings that Jerusalem was disarrayed and that the temple and the palace emptied some of their treasures and some of its inhabitants taken away to Israel as hostages. And as I've said many times already, when you study the book of 2 Kings, you might as well open another Bible if you want to get really deep and look at the book of 2 Chronicles chapter 26 in this case, where it gives more of a detailed account of the reign, which we're going to look at ourselves, Lord willing, late in the summertime, maybe September-ish. And just like Jehoash and Amaziah, we see that he was a compromiser, not removing the old traditional places of sacrifice to the Lord. In verse 5 through 7 here it says, "Then the Lord struck the king so that he was a leper until the day of his death, so he dwelt in an isolated house, and Jotham, the king's son, was over the royal's house, judging the people of the land. Now the rest of the acts of Azariah and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah?" So Azariah rested with his fathers, and they buried him with his fathers in the city of David. And then Jotham, his son, reigned in his place. So Azariah, he suffered from leprosy as a form of chastisement for taking over the priestly function of burning incense on the altar in the temple. And the disease eventually would kill him, as leprosy was a very deadly disease at this time period. And Azariah was relieved of all his royal responsibilities. And we see that his son Jotham served as a co-regent until his death, Azariah's death in 750 through 739 BC. And as the co-regent, Jotham specifically supervised the palace and he governed the nation. And Azariah, he violated God's law that kings could not be priests. And in Numbers chapter 18 verse 7, the law called for the death penalty for such an act. And here we are now. The remainder of this chapter will tell us the story of 5 kings over Israel. And a very common theme we're going to see through these kings are corruption and disorganization that will make them easy prey to the Gentile Assyria. In verse 8 through 12 says, "In the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Zechariah the son of Jeroboam reigned over Israel in Samaria 6 months, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord, as his fathers had done. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who had made Israel sin. Then Shallum, the son of Jabesh, conspired against him and struck and killed him in front of the people, and he reigned in his place. Now the rest of the acts of Zechariah, indeed, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. This was the word of the Lord, which he spoke to Jehu, saying, Your sons shall sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation. And so it was." So verses 8 through 12 here, the 38th year would have marked it to be 753 BC, and that would make Azariah's co-regent with his father Amaziah to begin somewhere around 792 to 791 BC, in the accession year of 790 BC, and a non-accession year. And Zechariah, he was the 4th and final generation for this dynasty of King Jehu. And his death fulfilled the prophecy, which a prophecy is like a promise, given by the Lord back in chapter 10 verse 32 and chapter 15 verse 12. And Shallum, he killed Zechariah, and he replaced him as king over Israel. And Assyrian records call Shallum the son of nobody, indicating that this guy, Shallum, was not of the royal family. And Zechariah, his reign over Israel and Samaria only lasted 6 months, we see. And a big part of that was because he continued to allow state-sponsored idolatry that was founded through King Jeroboam. And Zechariah, he was despised by his own people, which left him vulnerable. And this was the end of Jehu's dynasty, as mentioned, that began with such potential, but it ended with God's judgment, and God foretold in great darkness. In verse 13 through 16 says, Shallum, the son of Jabesh, became king in the 39th year of Uzziah, king of Judah, and he reigned a full month in Samaria. For Menahem, the son of Gadi, went up from Tirzah, came to Samaria, and struck Shallum, the son of Jabesh, in Samaria, and killed him, and he reigned in his place. Now the rest of the acts of Shallum, and the conspiracy which he led, indeed, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. Then from Tirzah, Menahem attacked Tifsah and all who were there in its territory, because they did not surrender. Therefore he attacked it, and all the women there who were with child he ripped open. And it's a little graphic. Once again, through the Old Testament here, we see many things that are very graphic and details that were given. But the 39th year set this out to be 752 BC. And we see that Zechariah, he is spanned the last months of Azariah's 38th year and the first months of the following year. And Menahem was likely a military commander under Zechariah. In Tirzah, he was the former capital of the northern, or was the former capital of the northern kingdom, as seen across the book in chapter 14 verse 17, chapter 15 verse 21, and chapter 15 verse 33. And it was located approximately 9 miles east of Samaria. And Menahem was likely stationed with his troops there. And Tiphsah was located on the Euphrates River, approximately 325 miles north of Samaria, as seen in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 4, verse 24. And a majority of interpreters, they translate Tiphsah to Tappuah, which was a town southwest about 14 miles, as seen in the book of Joshua, chapter 17, verse 8. And the ripping open a pregnant woman was an extremely cruel practice, and elsewhere associated only with the foreign armies and the minor prophets like Hosea chapter 13 verse 16 and Amos chapter 1 verse 13. And Menahem probably did this as a visible reminder of the city's failure to open up to his demands. And so we see the dynasty of Shallum lasted only 4 weeks, a very short term. And the writer of 2 Kings, he gave no moral comment here to make on this brief of a reign of Shallum. And we see that the chapter with Menahem added shows the depths of the ungodliness of the times of Israel. And hence the reason why I stated that Israel is a very unstable monarchy at this time. And today, it kind of reminds me of current government, where we got Planned Parenthood basically ripping children out of their mothers, committing murderous genocide. And this chapter reminded me of a news article. I can't believe we've already went past like 7 years already. But I remember a news article, I looked it up, and back in December 2015, there was a woman in New York, that had her baby cut out of her womb by a friend who put on this fake pregnancy with her significant other out of jealousy. So she ripped this child as she killed this baby and mother. She ripped the child out of the mother's womb to try to bring to her boyfriend and be like, see, I gave birth. But verse 17 through 22 continues here. In the 39th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Menahem, the son of Gadi, became king over Israel and reigned 10 years in Samaria. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart all his days from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who had made Israel sin. Pul, king of Assyria, came against the land, and Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, that his hand might be with him, to strengthen the kingdom under his control. And Menahem exacted the money from Israel, from all the very wealthy, from each man 50 shekels of silver, to give to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria turned back and did not stay there in the land. Now the rest of the acts of Menahem and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Menahem rested with his fathers. Then Pekahiah, his son, reigned in his place. So in this part here, verse 17 through 22, this would have left the 39th year at 752 BC. And so this 10-year span that we see is between 752 to 742 BC. And with Menahem, the northern kingdom changed from the non-accession to the accession year system by computing reigns. And Assyrian kings regularly had two names. They had the throne name for Assyria and another name for Babylon. And Pul was the Babylonian throne name for the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser, who we're going to see more about in our study in the book of 1 Chronicles chapter 15 verse 26, who reigned between 745 to 727 BC. And we're going to see that he invaded Israel in 743 BC. And Mahanaim paid tribute of the 1,000 talents of silver and 37 tons raised from the wealthy men of Israel. And each of the 60,000 men, they paid 20 ounces of silver to raise the required 37 tons of silver for his tribute. And Tiglath-Pileser III, he supported Menahem's claim to the throne of Israel, and he withdrew his army. And by this action, Menahem became a vassal of the Assyrian king. And like the others, Menahem continued state-sponsored idolatry that was put in place by Jeroboam. In verse 23 through 26 says, "In the 5th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekahiah, the son of Menahem, became king over Israel and Samaria, and reigned 2 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who had made Israel sin. Then Pekah, the son of Remaliah, an officer of his, conspired against him, and killed him in Samaria, in the citadel of the king's house, along with Argob and Ariah, and with him were 50 men of Gilead. He killed him and reigned in his place. Now the rest of the acts of Pekahiah, and all that he did indeed, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel." So the first year was 742 BC, and the 2-year span would have been 742 to 740 BC. And Pekah, he was one of Pekahiah's military officers, probably commanding Gilead, since 50 Gileadites accompanied him when he had assassinated Pekahiah. And Argob and Ariah, they were either Pekahiah's sons of loyal military officers. And Pekah probably represented the anti-Assyrian group in Israel. In verse 27 through 31 says, "In the 52nd year of Azariah, the king of Judah, Pekah, the son of Remaliah, became king over Israel and Samaria, and reigned 20 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who had made Israel sin. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and took Ijon, Abel, Beth, Machah, Januoah, Kadesh, Hazor, Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and he carried them captive to Assyria. Then Hosea, the son of Elah, led a conspiracy against Pekah, the son of Remaliah, and struck and killed him. So he reigned in his place in the 20th year of Jotham, the son of Uzziah. And now the rest of the acts of Pekah, and all that he did, indeed, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. So the 52nd year would have left it to be 740 BC, and 20 years was Pekah's reign between 752 to 732 BC, as Assyrians' records indicate that Tiglath-Pileser II, or the third, removed Pekah as king back in 732 BC. And evidentially, he used Hosea as his instrument. And Ijon and Naphtali were the areas of Galilee and Gilead that are described in verse 29. And when Pekah and Rezin, the king of Syria, sought to have Judah join their anti-Assyrian alliance, another invasion by Assyria was provoked in 733 to 732 BC. And Tiglath-Pileser III, he took Galilee and Gilead, and he converted them into 3 Assyrian provinces governed by royal appointees. And he was also involved in replacing Pekah with Hosea as king over the remaining areas of Israel. And Jotham of Judah, he began his reign in 750 BC. And his 20th year would have been 732 BC, according to the Nun accession year system. And Assyrians' records confirm that Hosea began his rule as king of Israel in 732 BC. And at this time, it was the dark days of Israel, with her territory now reduced to just some tiny little kingdom with only the size about 30 miles in width and 40 miles long. And historian Josephus, he commented and stated that Hosea was a friend of Pekah. And Pekah slew out of anger 100,000 Jews in one day, according to the account given in the book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 28, verse 6. And I want to look at verse 32 through 36. It says, in the 2nd year of Pekah, the son Remaliah, king of Israel, Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, began to reign. And he was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. And then he did what was right in the sight of the Lord. He did according to all that his father Uzziah had done. However, the high places were not removed. The people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. He built the upper gate of the house of the Lord. In verse 36, now the rest of the acts of Jotham and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles by the kings of Judah? And so the 2nd year would have been 750 BC, the year of Pekah's 2nd year of reign in Gilead, according to the accession year system. In verse 33, 16 years would have been between 750 to 735 BC. And according to verse 30 here, Jotham reigned until 731 BC, and he was probably replaced as the functioning king of Judah by a pro-Assyrian group who had established Ahaz as ruler while leaving Jotham as a powerless co-regent. And Isaiah and Micah, both of these prophets, major prophet and minor prophet, they both ministered to Judah during Jotham's reign. In verse 35, the upper gate, when we see, is probably the upper Benjamin gate, which stood along the north side of the temple complex, facing the territory of Dan. And we see the other accomplishments of Jotham are noted in the account given in 2 Chronicles chapter 23, verse 2 through 6. And wrap up the chapter here, verse 37-38 says, in those days the Lord began to send Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah the son of Remaliah against Judah. So Jotham rested with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David his father. Then Ahaz his son reigned in his place. So we see that the writer here, the author of 2 Kings, he's telling us of how the hand of the Lord that sent these foreign rulers who troubled Judah, that it was the hand of the Lord that sent these foreign rulers to trouble Judah. And so to wrap up our study for today, we looked at the summary of Azariah's reign over Judah. We see that he ends in a very sad state of compromise. And then we looked at the short evil reign of Zechariah, same thing. He was a compromiser. And we looked at even a briefer reign of Shallum. And we looked at the summary of the reign of Menahem. And we looked at the 2-year reign of Pekahiah. And we looked at the 20-year reign of Pekah. And we looked at the summary of the reign of Jotham. And we also look at the end where Judah begins to be chastened for their partial obedience. And a couple things I want to wrap up with here is that, remember, when we go through the book of 2 Kings, maybe it's not having your interest all that much, but when we could see the effects of partial obedience, we see that God called some of these kings good, but they did not do this. And partial obedience is the same as disobedience. And I'm going to say that one more time. When we think that we can partially obey God, it is still disobedience. And we see that this troubled monarchy, that, you know, God judges them. And I want to look at a passage real quick that I'm adding in here in the book of Daniel. Verse 2, chapter 2. And I want to look at verse 20. So Daniel chapter 2, verse 20 through 22 we'll go with. Daniel answered and said, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his, and he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and he raises up kings, and he gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him." And, you know, a key thought that I want to end this with is we see the bad kings and very short-term kings of Israel. And Israel is very unstable. They are not following God. And, you know, with this passage, I believe it is fair to say that God removes kings and he sets up new ones. And I believe that God can put wicked rulers over a nation as a form of judgment. And that's going to wrap up this video for today. We'll see you next, as we'll be looking at the 16th chapter to be announced. And we are now 60% of the way through our study here in the book of 2 Kings. So I hope you have a great rest of your evening. God bless, and we'll see you next time.